Welcome to Evolutionary Men. I'm your host, Jason Lang. Let's get started. All right, and welcome back. So on a TED Fixable Live conversation, the host asked Scott Galloway, podcaster, author, influencer, about embodying both his masculine and his feminine. Because here's a man known for being fiercely competitive and also known for being willing to cry in public. And what he said back was more important than I think he realized. He said, "I never thought that crying would be such an attribute. I didn't cry from the age of 29 to 44. I didn't cry when my mother died. I didn't cry when I got divorced. I didn't cry when my company went Chapter 11. For 15 years, I didn't cry. I forgot how." So sit with that for a second. 15 years. The loss of his mother, the end of his marriage, the collapse of his company. He could not access his own grief. And he was telling it as a story of transformation, right? He cries now. He told that audience, and I'm quoting, that leaning into his emotions is one of the ways he's found to slow down and be in the moment. And he's totally right about that. So here's where I want to start. The same man who stood on that stage and said leaning into his emotion is what brought him back into the present, turns around and writes a book telling young men the path to manhood is to be provider, protector, procreator, and then he talks about service. So the thing he himself discovered, the thing that brought him home, emotions, doesn't really make it into the framework. So this episode is not really about Scott. It's about the partial truth he's handing young men, and the part he's leaving out in particular. Because the part he's leaving out is the part that actually keeps a man alive. So I have a lot of respect for Scott. He's brave for naming the male crisis at scale, and the numbers he points to are real, right? Almost 4 times the suicide rate. Loneliness off the charts. 1 in 3 guys under 30 in a relationship versus 2 in 3 women of the same age. Education gap widening. Deaths of despair landing mostly on men. None of that is made up. I talk about it all the time. And that's the lived reality of the men I work with. So he's right that doing nothing is worse than what he prescribes, right? So lift weights, build economic viability, ask women out, yes. Join something, absolutely serve something. All of that beats doom scrolling and edibles in a dark apartment. I've done all that too. And he's a man who has done some of his own inner work, right? He's not a guy who refuses the inside. I'll come back to what that work has actually shown him in a few minutes because it really matters. So again, this is not a takedown. I hate that part of social media. What I'm naming today is what's missing from the prescription, generously, because the missing piece is the piece that decides whether the next generation of men actually makes it in some kind of evolutionary sense. So his framework is necessary, but it is not sufficient. Scott Galloway's framework comes down to 3 or 4 things. The big 3, provider, protector, and procreator. And then he adds service, what he calls surplus value. Add more than you take. But listen to that list and notice what all 4 of those have in common. Every one is something a man produces for someone else. Every one is measurable from the outside. Provider, look at the bank account. Protector, look at how safe your family is. Procreator, look at the partner and the kids. Service, look at the surplus value, right? The volunteer hours, the donations. In this map, a man is a function. He is the value he generates. If he produces, he's a man. If he stops producing, he's not. That's the trap. And you should feel it. If you grew up in this culture, it probably sounds right. It sounds like exactly what being a man is. And that's the problem. This is the same definition that's been wearing men down for over 50 years, with the effect softened and service added on top. The disease that grinds men down didn't start because men stopped being providers. It got worse as we became more obsessive about output and less connected to ourselves and each other, right? Suicide rates have climbed while productivity has climbed. Loneliness has climbed while professional achievement and productivity has climbed. The output man is a depleted man, just with better metrics. And his sons are feeling and dying from it too. Galloway tells young men that economic viability is the bedrock, that their self-esteem and their standing in the tribe, the community, the culture will be judged, in his words, disproportionately by their ability to provide. Watch what happens when a man builds his identity on being a provider. Uh-oh, he gets laid off. He's not a man anymore. His wife out-earns him. He's not a man anymore. He gets sick and can't work for 6 months. He's not a man anymore. AI eats his job, manufacturing leaves town, the industry shifts. Suddenly, he's not a man anymore. Tie your identity to economic output, and you get the most brittle masculinity possible. You are renting your manhood from your circumstances. And in 2026, those circumstances are unstable in ways they have never been unstable before. And it's the same problem in the body with what Scott talks about. Galloway tells young men to be able to walk into any room and overpower or outrun everybody. You can, for a while. Then biology is undefeated. The body that could outrun anyone at 25 cannot outrun anyone at 70. If your identity is, I'm the strongest man in the room, what happens when you're not? I have watched this, right? Warriors at 50, broken at 70, totally lost by 80. Their identity was rented from their bodies. And when the rent went up, they had nothing left. So, longtime listeners know there's a tool from the philosopher Ken Wilber that absolutely changed my life. And it shows exactly part of what's missing in Scott's prescription. Any human life is happening in 4 places at once. There's the inside of you, your felt experience, what you're actually feeling in your body right now. Individual, introspective. Then there's the outside of you, your body, your behavior, what people can see you're doing, can measure it with a microscope. Then there's the inside of us, the connection, the we space, the actual felt connection between you and another person. You might be feeling it even with me right now. That's understanding. And there's the outside of us, the systems, the economy, the institutions, all the things we're embedded in. So these are 4 territories. Really important. Now run Galloway's prescription through that map. Lift weights, run, get strong. It's all outside of you. Make money, build economic vitality, get into the top 8%. It's outside of us. Join a sports league, volunteer, ask girls out. Outside of you, outside of us. He gives young men just 2 of the 4 quadrants of life and reality, and he calls it a whole man. The 2 he leaves out are the 2 where young men are actually dying the most. The inside of you, where the loneliness and rage and grief and shame live. That's where presence happens. In the inside of us, where the actual healing happens, where one man finally tells the truth to another man and gets met. Deep connection. That's where brotherhood happens. And on a 2.5-hour podcast, right, with Andrew Huberman about saving young men, the word presence essentially does not appear. Embodiment, getting in your body, getting connected to your body, feeling what's inside of it, does not appear. Interiority barely appears. The inner life of a man is not a place that conversation really goes. That's the framework that Scott is prescribing. So let me name one of the first things I think is missing we need to add to that framework. Presence, right? It has two faces and both matter. The first face is presence with yourself. It's the capacity to actually be in your own body, to feel what's here, to get grounded, to know that the tightness in your chest is grief, not just stress, to know that the heat in your gut is anger, not just hunger. And it's the ability to sit at 2 a.m. with whatever is there without reaching for the bottle, the phone, the porn, the food, the TikTok, the work. This is interoception. It's the foundation of every emotional skill a man will ever build. And most men I work with were trained out of it before they were even 10. Stop crying, sit still, tough it out, push harder, don't be vulnerable. By the time we're grown up, a lot of us men have a feeling vocabulary I've talked about of I'm good, bad, or fine, and that's it. And here's why this matters. For every other P in the framework, a man who cannot feel himself cannot feel the woman or child or person in front of him either. He cannot feel his children. He cannot feel his friends. He can't attune to others if he can't attune to himself. He can perform for them. He can provide for them. He can protect them. Yes, he can even serve them. He can do everything on that checklist, but they can still feel alone with him in the room. Because for him, inside of him, no one is home. Without presence, every output becomes a performance, right? Every relationship just becomes a transaction. Every accomplishment becomes another thing you can lose and feel like a fraud about. With presence, a man becomes someone whose nervous system actually downshifts the room, whose wife feels felt just when he walks in, and whose kids relax when he comes home. And someone whose friends trust him because he's not just performing, he's there. So hear this. You can hit every P Galloway names. You can be a great provider. You can keep your family safe. You can show up at the school plays. And yes, you can serve your community. And you can still be the man who wakes up at 55, the kid's gone, and then his wife sits him down and says, I haven't loved you in years. I've had that conversation in my work more times than I can count. The guy comes into the work and he's devastated. He says, I did everything I was supposed to do. I worked 60 hours a week. I paid for the house, the school. I did my best to be there. And what his wife is actually telling him back was, yes, you were paying, but you were performing. You weren't really with us. I haven't felt you. Your kids haven't felt you present in 15 years. You were too stressed, exhausted, etc. And that's Scott's framework performed perfectly. A man who did everything he was told. And he ended up alone in the house he paid for. So then the second face of presence is actually about the inside of us, right? The inside of us. It's real brotherhood. It's not networking. It's not accountability calls about fitness, about finances. It can be a part of it, but it's about something deeper than that. It's not just about doing sports or watching shit together. It's two men sitting across from each other with nothing to do, no agenda, no shared task, but telling the truth. And then the other one, not bolting. So, to his credit, Galloway talks about brotherhood. He really does. But every example is an activity. The sports league, the skateboarding club, the fraternity. Take the activity away, and there is no relationship necessarily left. That's the outside of us wearing a friendship costume. I have guys that spend time with each other all the time, but they're alone because they don't speak about the inside. They still feel lonely. So, the biology of male bonding, right, I've talked about it before, which is related to vasopressin and the regulation that happens when men are actually together with nothing to produce, is one of the most powerful medicines for a man's mental health that we have. It's free, it's available, and almost no man I meet has access to it. Boys who don't get this become men who try to get it from a woman. They put the entire weight of their emotional regulation on their wife or girlfriend, and often it crushes the marriage. Or they try to get it from work, from achievement, or from the gym, or from substances even. Or for many, they just don't get it at all. And then, yes, not to be too bleak, but then they die. Again, almost 4 times the suicide rate is what happens when a generation of men is starving for the inside of us, for connection, and has been handed a framework that says a sports league will do it. Okay, now there's another big P that I think is missing from the framework that if we add it, makes all the difference in the world. And I was recently at a men's conference and really got inspired by this one by a man there. So this is the one thing most men I work with are actually quite starved for. And it's simple. Play. Play is non-productive output. It's the thing you do that produces nothing. No surplus value, no outcome, no metric, no deliverable, no optimization. You did it because doing it was the point. Galloway has no real language for this, and it's not one of his P's. And frankly, not one of them really has room for a man doing something that doesn't produce some kind of output. Every category is instrumental. Produce, output. You're useful, you're contributing, you're protecting, you're providing, you're adding surplus value. So where in his framework is a man allowed to be useless on purpose with the people he loves for the joy of it, for the creativity of it? It's not there. And the men I work with feel that absence in their bones, even when they can't name it. So let me describe what I see, because this is one of the things that breaks my heart in this work. Men come into my groups in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, and they have forgotten how to play. Ask them what they do for fun, and they list optimized activities. The morning run, the cold plunge, the weighted ruck. The poker night, that's actually secretly networking or drinking. The fishing trip, that's actually a business retreat, right? Oftentimes, every single thing is producing something. Ask them when's the last time they did something for no reason at all, with no goal attached, and you watch them often go blank. They don't know because they can't remember. Some get visibly uncomfortable because the question lands as an accusation, right? But it isn't. They've just been starved of this for so long. They don't even recognize the hunger anymore. That's actual malnourishment. So trained to monetize their attention that aimlessness feels like a moral failure. So convinced that every hour must produce that they've turned hobbies into side hustles, friendships into networking, and weekends into protocols. And, even time with their kids into quality time with the development goal attached. I know I've done that. So play is what a kid does when no one is watching and no one is grading, right? It's rolling around on the carpet with the dog for 20 minutes for no reason. It's getting your ass kicked at pickleball by your 12-year-old and laughing about it. So play is the thing you can't really put on your calendar as a goal. Production-trained men cannot really do this. They try, and it comes out wrong. They schedule the fun. They biohack the joy. They put play with the kids from 4 to 5 p.m. on the calendar. But they're not actually present in it. And then, right, when they do show up, there's a structured activity prepared rather than attuning to and being with their kids. And kids feel it. The kid doesn't just want a certain type of calendared time. The kid wants a dad who will lie on the floor and be goofy and be a horse for 40 minutes for no other reason than that's what the kid asked for in the moment, right? Our wives feel it too. A wife doesn't want a man who has optimized her into his schedule. She wants a man who can be humorous and silly with her, who can flirt with her in the middle of a Tuesday, who can build something pointless with her on a Sunday afternoon, abandon it halfway done, and not feel like he has wasted the time. So here's the part that should land. Play is one of the only things in a man's life that doesn't expire when the body does. Only other one is presence. So, right, an 80-year-old man cannot deadlift 400 pounds, but he can still play. He can be playful with his grandkids. He can be present with his grandkids. And he can still play and be present with his wife of 50 years. He can still be playful and present with his friends. Play, presence, they don't age out. The elders, who often command the room in indigenous cultures all around the world, were often both the most playful and the most present, not just the most productive. And we've lost that. We've replaced presence and play with more productivity. And now our elders look like men who have lost something, rather than men who still have something we want. The other thing about play is it's often where shame goes to die. A man who can't play is almost always a man who's afraid of looking stupid, right? Of not being good at something, of being seen as less than a man. The production frame trains you to only do what you're good at because output is the only thing that counts. Play trains you to do the thing because doing it is the point. It's fun, it's flow, it's creative. And not knowing how is often part of the joy. If you want to feel how malnourished you are, try this. Pick something you're bad at that produces nothing, that you cannot turn into content or self-improvement, and do it for an hour with someone you love. Just 1 hour. And watch what comes up. The boredom, the urgency to make it useful, the reach for the phone, the voice in your head asking, when will this be over? So you can get back to something more productive, right? That voice, it's the disease us men are all feeling. That voice is what 40 years of being trained to produce sounds like in your nervous system. And that voice is what your kids, frankly, are inheriting from you if you don't interrupt it. So the key here is to stack these things. You can hit every P Scott names and then add presence and still be miserable if you've optimized play out of your life. And you can have presence and play, lose the job, lose the body, and still be a man people want to be around. That's so key. So here's the thing. There's another phrase from Ken Wilber that I love, and it's transcend and include, right? You don't throw out the previous gold, the previous stage. You build on it. And Galloway's framework is necessary, like I said, but not enough. So be a provider, yes. Be a protector, yes. Be a procreator, yes. Be of service, absolutely. Keep all of it. And add presence. a real relationship with your own interior and others as well. So the provider becomes a capacity rooted in something the world cannot take from you. So the protector becomes a felt steadiness, not just a hard body. So the procreator becomes a partnership where your wife actually gets to feel you with her. So service becomes the natural overflow of a man who is full instead of a duty performed by a man who is empty. And then you add play, non-productive output. So the man inside all of those roles is actually still alive. So his kids want to be around him. So his wife wants to come home to him. So his friends want to hang out with him and have some fun for no reason at all. So when his body fails him, it will. And he still has something to bring to the people who love him. So again, take Scott's P's, but put presence underneath all of them as the soil. And then put play next to them as the aliveness, right? Without it, the P's are a checklist for renting your manhood from circumstances. It's just the man box repackaged. With it, when we add these, they become the natural expression of a man who knows who he is. This is the work that decides whether you come home to yourself or die a stranger in your own life. And you know what? I'll tell you why I care about this. I grew up in a house with zero presence. Lower middle class, Midwest, safe neighborhood, food on the table, but no real touch, no interiority, no one in the house actually with each other. I didn't know that was strange. It's just what was. But then puberty hit, I got into relationships, I got interested in girls, and you know what? My body locked up. I was sweaty, frozen, anxious. I didn't know how to be with people. I couldn't talk to women I was attracted to. So I was a really late bloomer, still a virgin in my mid-20s, and not even telling my friends I had made. I was carrying it all alone. Now, by Galloway's framework, that version of me had everything external a young man is supposed to. Right? I had a stable home. I had an education. I had a future. I had safety. I had a job. And on the inside, I was dying. So what woke me up wasn't another book or better workout or more productivity or even asking more girls out. I couldn't have done that in that nervous system anyway. It was my first men's group. And in particular, one shadow work weekend in Boulder, Colorado, where, right, within 10 minutes, I've told this story before, of working with a mentor of mine, I was on my back, sobbing, calling out, touch me, where are you? And it was in the voice of a 2-year-old, and I was nearly 25 years old. Finally meeting the part of me that had been running my life from the inside. And that moment of connecting to what was inside of me did more for me than years of reading, studying, and productivity hacking combined. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to understand my pain cognitively, but I was actually feeling it. And I was being held by other men who didn't flinch. That's the inside of me and the inside of us. That's the medicine. Now back to Scott. Because, I want to be honest and I want you to hear the whole thing. So he has done some of his own inner work, right? He went to couples counseling. He tried ketamine therapy once. He cries now. He writes openly about leaning into emotions and how it slows time down. Yes. And the ketamine session was real. He went in, and what came out of it was beautiful. He wrote that his role with the people close to him is to provide witness to their life, to let them know he notices, to rescue them from any doubt that they matter. Here's the thing, that's pure inside work. That's presence. That's true. That's a gift of the masculine that has nothing to do with how strong his body is or how much is in his bank account. And here's the honest part he wrote himself. Going into that experience, he said that whatever trauma or demons sat in his subconscious, he had managed to mostly suppress. And he was down with that. Let sleeping dogs lie. I respect the honesty of that. Most men won't even say that. But notice what it is. He went to the edge of his own interior, took one look, brought something back real, and then he closed the door behind him, right? Then he turned around and wrote a book of advice for young men, and the prescription matches what he himself chose. Outputs, outputs, outputs. So I want to leave you with one more thing, and I want you to listen to this one carefully. Because Scott told the same story twice in his own life. Without seeming to notice, it was actually the same story. The first time was in his own newsletter after that one ketamine session. He wrote about what he learned. And his line was, I realized, that my role is, among those close to me, to provide witness to their life, just like I said, for them to know that I notice. That's the witness. Hold on to it. The second time was on the Huberman episode when Scott told the story of the man who shaped him most, the man he called his kind of male role model. And I want you to listen to who this man actually was. This man was Scott's mom's boyfriend, around every other weekend. And here's the part Scott reveals halfway through. The man had another family, a first family. Scott and his mom were actually the second family. His mother didn't know. The man was living a double life. Now run that guy through Scott's own framework. Provider, he wasn't a stable partner to the woman he was deceiving. Protector, he couldn't protect Scott's mother from the basic truth of his own existence. Procreator, he was hiding kids from kids. Service, hard to argue. By every metric in the book Scott wrote, that man fell short of the P's. But then here's what Scott says about him on tape with the benefit of almost 50 years of reflection after the man recently dies. He says, and I'm quoting, just this guy's interest in me, just meant the world. You hear it? Scott just told you twice in 2 different rooms what actually matters. On a ketamine integration, my role is to provide witness and to let them know I noticed. On a podcast about saving young men, the man who built me came over every other weekend and noticed me. It's the same teaching, twice, from the same man's mouth. Notice, witness, interest, presence. That's the inside. That's the half of the map that Scott leaves out. That's what Scott has actually discovered in his own life and named out loud more than once. And then somehow, he didn't put it really in the book. I don't think he did it on purpose, I think the water he's swimming in just makes some things invisible, even when he can describe them clearly. He's halfway home and he doesn't know it yet. A lot of young men are going to take his prescription and stop exactly where he stopped in the book. If you've executed the outputs and you're still flat at 2 a.m., listen to me if you're that man. You don't need another one of his P's. You don't need a sharper checklist. You don't need to grind harder. You need the half of yourself you were told didn't matter as a man. You need at least one other man who can sit across from you and actually feel you in the room with no agenda in between. And you need to remember how to play. That's the work. That's where men come back. So here's the deal. The truth is, though he's added some nuance, Scott's just recapitulating the provider trap, the very man box that is killing men every day. We are allowed to have interiors as men. We are allowed to have fun as men. We are allowed to be connected to each other as men. And here's the really wild thing that I think he totally misses. If you focus on being a man who can be radically present in yourself and with other people, developing interoception and the capacity to be a relational leader, and then you do that in the context of being lighthearted and filling your life with play and fun, guess what I've seen? you end up making more money. You become more attractive. You build social capital that can help protect you in life. So the 3 Ps, even with service added, just are not enough. We have to add presence, a sense of interiority with ourselves and with other men, and play to the mix. Again, this is additive, but without it, we're just recapitulating the same provider trap and the same man box that's been beating men down for many years. So if you want help, I have some ways you can work with me. The Men's Group Experience is a 12-week container built exactly for this work. And then I also have Pillars of Presence, which is a deeper container about presence itself in relating, particularly to the feminine. And then I have the deepest one of all, the Heart of Shadow, which is where we really work the hardest material in the context of a men's group. The inside is the work, right? And brotherhood is the medicine, the nourishment that makes it all possible. And play, it ends up being the proof that you're alive, that you're enjoying things. And presence, once again, is the ground all of this is grown from. So if I had my way, and I'm trying to, that's the map I want to hand young men today. All right, let me know what you think, and until next time.